Hi, my name is Leah. I'm a knitter based in the UK and I love stockinette sweaters with a little bit of extra spice. And for today's pattern roundup, I would like to share with you 14 sweater patterns that have exactly that. Mostly stockinette, maybe a bit of ribbing and a little bit of extra spice. So if that sounds good to you, then please stay tuned for this video. If you are new, hi. I film regular podcast episodes on this channel, but I also do the occasional pattern roundup. And I particularly enjoy doing roundups that are a little bit more specific than just, plain stockinette sweaters. I like a little bit of spice, so I'm adding that into this roundup. And essentially, the patterns that I've chosen for this roundup are the kind of elevated basics that are just a little bit more special, that have a little detail that draws the eye just a little bit. And I've discovered over the years that while I do enjoy knitting a more complex pattern, and a maximalist pattern is always really beautiful to look at, when it comes to getting dressed on a daily basis, I gravitate towards my stockinette sweaters much more. But I would like to wear something that's a little bit unique and a little bit more special than what you could just buy from a regular clothing store off the rack. So I really enjoy basics with a little twist, with a little spice, with a little something extra. And today I am wearing one of those, and I will get into that pattern straight away when we get started. I will leave a link down below with the Ravelry bundle that I've created for this pattern roundup. And if you would like to know more details about any of the patterns that I share, you can just click on that link and have a read there. I personally don't enjoy pattern roundups that have a lot of numerical details, so I won't be sharing with you sort of size ranges and metric and imperial details and yardages and needle sizes, because I find that tedious to listen to. But I will try and do my best to let you know whether a pattern is size inclusive or not as per current industry standards. That's the word I'm looking for. If you can hear the rain, I apologise. It has just started pouring down and the lighting is very bad, but it is actually mid-morning here in November in the UK, and this is just what I have to work with, so I do apologise about that. And if you can hear some background noise, my doggies are also around me, so I apologise for that as well. And let's jump into the video. The first pattern I would like to share with you, while it's hammering down, is my piping hot sweater, which is what I'm wearing today. And I love this pattern so much, I'm knitting another one, and this is my second one that is currently on the needles. And as you can see, this is a basic stockinette sweater. There is mostly stockinette, a little bit of ribbing, and then it just has that little bit of extra something there. And this was actually the inspiration for this pattern roundup, because I love this pattern so much, I'm knitting it a second time. This, if you're not familiar with it, is a pattern by Lily Kate France from Lily Kate Makes. And I will be sharing 3 patterns by her, because to me she is the queen of basic with a little bit of extra something. She makes some beautiful garments with excellent fit, and like I say, they're all very wearable, very sort of basic, but they have that bit of extra something that draws the eye, that keeps you interested while you are knitting as well. And the piping hot sweater is definitely one of those. This is a DK weight pattern. It is worked top down, the yoke is worked flat, and you start off by making these saddle shoulders, from which you then pick up from. There's lots of shaping, lots of short rows, like is really common with Lily's patterns, because she really focuses on excellent fit. And then it has sort of a hybrid between a set-in sleeve and a drop shoulder. Now in this version, mine looks very dropped, and that is because I made 2 errors. And I think in a lot of Lily's constructions, I would bear that in mind. I am using, for this pattern, I used a relatively heavy yarn, and it has a lot of drape, and I also am between sizes, and I went for 1 size up. And generally speaking, in most of her patterns, I would recommend that you size down. And she actually says that in this particular pattern that she recommends you size down as well, and that you use a yarn that's fairly lightweight and bouncy, or woolen spun, for example, which is what I'm using for my second version, but my first version I didn't. So it is just, as you can see, the neckline is just a little bit wider. You can kind of see the straps of what I'm wearing underneath. The sleeves are very long. Even though I knit everything to pattern, it's all just a tiny bit too oversized. But I still love the sweater, and I will wear it to death, because I actually was working on this test knit when I met Lily, and it has some really nice memories linked to it. So yeah, you need not very much for your contrast colour, and you can use anything for this piping detail. There's also video links within the pattern where you can follow exactly what she does for the piping. It's not difficult, but it is worked in intarsia. So you basically have these little bobbins that are attached. Sorry, that's really blowing out because it's bright, this one. And I'm actually using a cotton acrylic blend for the piping, and it's almost a little bit too thick as well because I'm holding it double for this, but it works. And for this first version that I made, I used a hand-dyed yarn, hand-dyed fingering weight yarn, and I held it with mohair. So I've actually got this fluffy caterpillar look that I really enjoy. So yeah, that's the Piping Hot Sweater by Lily Kate France from Lily Kate Makes, and she definitely inspired this video. If we move on to the next pattern by her that I would like to share, it is the Calm Down cardigan. And again, this is also a DK weight pattern, and the construction is actually pretty much the same, if I remember rightly. I have knit this pattern before, and the only reason I don't own it anymore is because it just grew to be too big, and that was, again, my yarn choice was the problem. But I would really like to knit this cardigan again because I think it's really beautiful. And the little details that draw the eye with this particular pattern are the ribbed saddle shoulders, and then I think there's a little bit of ribbing running down the side as well, just a tiny little detail. But the thing that I think is really special about this cardigan is that it has a notch at the bottom, a little cutout, and I've seen a few other patterns since that do that, but I think Lily was one of the first to sort of put that into a pattern, and I think it just looks really cool. It looks really polished and really different, and again, I would highly recommend this pattern, but maybe size down and use a sort of lightweight yarn, again, is what I would recommend. It is knit, hers is knit in BC Garn Loch Lomond, which is a woolen spun yarn. So yes, that is what I would recommend. Third and final pattern from Lily that I'll recommend in this roundup, but let's be honest, most of her patterns would actually fit the bill really well here, is the Close to Me sweater. Now, I haven't knit this one myself, but I knit the Close to Me cardigan as part of a test knit. This is, again, a DK weight pattern. It is also sort of a saddle shoulder, drop shoulder, hybrid-y kind of thing, like a lot of Lily's patterns are. And it features just a little bit of garter stitch on the shoulders where the shaping is happening. Then that is mirrored in a little bit of garter stitch on the cuffs, but actually the element that draws the eye is the little triangular sweatshirty detail at the front neck, which I think is really beautiful. If you like that detail, then let's move on to two more patterns that have this little sweatshirt detail that just elevates the basic stockinette sweater a little bit. By the way, all patterns from Lily are fully size inclusive. I forgot to mention that. I will try to mention it better in the next few patterns. So the first pattern I would like to mention that also has this little detail is the Autumn League Pullover by Alexandra Tabell of Two of Wands. You have probably seen this pattern. It's been around for quite some time. It came out in 2018, and it is a DK weight pattern but at a 19 stitch gauge, so I reckon worsted would work as well. And it is almost size inclusive, not quite. I think it's missing sort of 1 or 2 sizes at the top end of the spectrum, but it is a free pattern. You can purchase this pattern if you want an ad-free version, but you can follow it for free on her blog. And when I knit this sweater, I was not very good at understanding gauge. So again, this is another pattern that I don't own anymore, but I would knit it again. And she has since updated the pattern. I think she's added some sizes, and the pattern is now worked in the round. Before, you worked the front and back flat, which made absolutely no sense to me at all, but now it's worked in the round, and it is a raglan construction. So if you like the look of Lily's version, but you'd prefer a slightly bigger gauge that grows a little bit faster and you would prefer a raglan, then I would recommend this pattern. If you would rather have a drop shoulder that also has this little triangular detail that also features loads of different options for bust shaping, then how about the Any Day Sweatshirt by Isolde Teague? Now, this pattern is a fully size inclusive pattern. It goes up to a 70-inch bust, and as I say, it features lots of extra shaping details for bust circumferences that I think would be really useful for a lot of people. This is worked top down again, which is my favourite type of construction, and it has a 22 stitch gauge, and it also has a neat little detail that runs along the back of the shoulder. It looks to me like it's almost like a little lateral braid or something. So I think that's really pretty as well, because you've got the little focal point at the front, but when you turn around, you've got a little something in the back as well that draws the eye. Now let's talk about some patterns that have neat details on the sort of shoulder lines. The first one I would like to share with you is the Arches Sweater by Lena Rix, also known as Odd Row. That is her sort of brand name. This is not a size inclusive pattern. It is unfortunately missing a few sizes at the upper end. There are several patterns, I think, in her sort of range that has this feature, but this is the sweater version, and it is a DK plus lace weight at a 15 stitch gauge. So you could probably use like a lofty sort of Aran weight as well if you don't want to use the lace weight. And essentially it has this really nice little curved detail along the saddle shoulder. So this is sort of a saddle shoulder, but it's also a drop shoulder. It has a really big drop, and then it has these little arches, basically. That's hence the name, that sort of are created. I don't actually know how she creates those. I don't know if it's increases or short rows. I'm really intrigued by this pattern because I have seen a few other patterns that feature this little detail, and I would really like to know how it is worked. If you like that, but you like to emphasize those little details a bit more, how about the Sabrina sweater by Suvi Knits? Again, a pattern that is almost size inclusive, but not quite. It's missing a little bit of sizing at the top end of the spectrum. This is a drop shoulder, so it hasn't got the saddle, it hasn't got the detail on the front and on the back. You can kind of see it more on the back, but it features this little twist. I think it might be a cable, just a little twist along the upper back shoulder. I'll insert some pictures obviously so you can see. And that detail is then mirrored along the top where you pick up for the sleeves, and also at the bottom before the hem. But if you want to keep it more minimal, you could just do the one on the top and basically leave it out in the sleeves and at the hem, and just have that little focal point at the upper shoulder so that it would basically look like a completely plain sweater from the front. This is a sport weight pattern at a 22 stitch gauge, so a light DK would probably work really well as well. And it is worked top down and flat, and also in the round. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting little extra detail. It's sort of a bit more elevated, maybe a little bit more striking and a bit less minimal. Along the same lines, how about the Yara sweater by the designer called Malin Borgersen? I think she goes by, I don't know how to pronounce this, I'm going to try Mineglater, maybe? This is a DK weight pattern, and it is a saddle shoulder, and it's one of those saddle shoulders where the whole saddle runs along the back. And then at the front you can just sort of see it obviously either side of the crew neck. And the interesting thing about this pattern is that it features this really cool braided detail all the way along the back of the saddle, and then also along the front here. And yeah, I think that is really, really striking. As far as I can tell, again, the sizing could do with having a couple of extra sizes at the top end. And my only concern with this pattern is that the braid looks like it pulls everything in a little bit. So that would be something you'd have to keep an eye on, I think, if you were to knit this. But it is knit on a sport plus lace equals sport. To me, that's just DK at a 21 stitch gauge. And yeah, I think that is really, really cool. Maybe you could also, again, omit the bit at the front and just have it on the back, and just have it as this little detail that you can only see when you turn around. If you like interesting lines, but otherwise a basic sweater, like this one, like the ones I've just shown you, but you would prefer it in a contrast colour again, so coming back to sort of this concept, how about the newly released linear sweater by Petite Knit? Now again with Petite Knit, her size range is a little bit iffy, because at the top end, I believe the biggest size technically fits a 60-inch bust, but only if you're happy with the lower end of the recommended ease. So it's almost size inclusive, but not quite. And it is a little bit annoying because just that little bit more and she would be all the way there. And I'm not sure why she doesn't have those graded just that little bit bigger at the top end. So I need to mention that here. This is a Aran weight sweater at 18 stitch gauge in that newly released Sandnesgarn yarn called Atlas. I have never worked with this yarn, so I can't comment on that. I think it's only just come out. And this is a very oversized drop shoulder sweater, and it features a line in a contrast colour across the top of the back, and then also where you pick up for the sleeves. So it's a very basic garment, and I don't know how she does this line. I don't know if it's a little tuck or just a little purl row. It's really hard to see in the photos, but if you like just that little bit of extra detail, then this could be the pattern for you. If you would like a little bit more detail than that, how about the Ava jacket by My Favourite Things Knitwear? Again, a designer who is missing a few sizes at the top end, which is a real shame because she's a big designer and she should be grading those patterns to be just a little bit bigger. I found this to be a really, really striking pattern, and that's why I wanted to include it in this roundup. It has that detail that runs all the way from the bottom of the sleeve up and along the upper back and then down. So it has sort of a vibe a little bit like the one that I'm wearing. But this is a little bit more special in my opinion because it features this, I don't know how this colour work is done, but it basically looks like newspaper writing, which I think is really, really interesting. And I'd love to knit this just to see how it is constructed and how this colour work is put in there, because it looks to be colour work, but it looks extremely simple and minimal. And yeah, I just think it's really, really cool. This is a pattern where you hold a DK and a sport and a fingering together. So quite a lot of different yarn weights that are held together to make a bulky gauge of 15 stitches. And essentially it is a jacket. It's got a high collar. It's got those lovely toggle buttons. But yeah, I just think this is a really striking pattern. And again, from a distance, very plain basic, but then just has these little extra details when you come up close. Move on to some pleats. How about the Syra, which is a sweater pattern by Tricot Design MCL. This is a size inclusive pattern, I think. Yes, it is a size inclusive pattern, and it is a fingering weight pattern, but at a 24 stitch gauge. So I think that's a sort of manageable fingering weight gauge that, you know, won't take absolutely ages to grow. And it is a beautiful crew neck sweater with drop shoulder construction, and then it has these pleats at the bottom of the sleeves before you do the cuff. The rest of it is completely plain. I believe it is worked top down. It doesn't actually say. Yes, it is worked top down, I apologise. And so it has all the plain basic details that we all like, and then it just has this little pleat. So I believe there are no decreases within the sleeve, but then before you do the cuff, you work this pleat, and it just draws the eye to that little special detail. If you like a pleat, but you would prefer a cardigan, how about the Cardigan Sole by Mochi Knits? Now this is a pattern that unfortunately could do with quite a few extra sizes at the top end. And I believe Mochi Knits is a Korean designer, and from my understanding, a lot of Korean designers tend to design a smaller size range, but as they're becoming more and more popular across the globe, especially more sort of in the Western world, they are more likely to add more sizes to their size range, and there has definitely been an increase in that, so that's just worth mentioning. It is a worsted weight pattern at a 15 stitch gauge, which seems a little bit odd. I think the yarn is discontinued, so to me 15 stitches and worsted seems to be very big, but maybe this was a very lofty yarn, so definitely worth checking the gauge and what kind of yarn to use first for this. It is a drop shoulder cardigan worked top down, and it has twisted ribbing along the front, it has pockets, it's very plain, it is very boxy, and then it has pleats again on the sleeves, like the pattern that I just mentioned before, and I just think that's really cool. It's just a really cool little extra detail on a very basic, everyday wearable cardigan. Let's now talk about some interesting hems, shall we? And the first sweater I would like to mention is the Astrid sweater by Pernille Larsen of Knitting for Olive. This is a DK weight bottom up sweater, and it is fully size inclusive. The interesting part about this sweater is the hem. So there are some short rows and some special shaping work within the hem that creates this really cool little curved notch on the side. I will put a picture in of that as well so that you can see. The only thing that puts me off this sweater is that it's worked bottom up, but my best guess is that that kind of hem was just easiest to design bottom up. It is, as I say, a DK weight pattern at a 20 stitch gauge. It is a drop shoulder, but I think if you've been here before, you will know I get a lot of sensory issues with drop shoulders and tight trapezoidal shaping. I believe this one won't have this because my best guess is that you either seam the upper shoulder, or there's a 3 needle bind off or something like that because it's worked bottom up. So that is something worth mentioning. The other pattern I would like to share with you that also has a really interesting hem is the Comfort Pullover by Celine Phaeton. This very recently came out, and it is a fully size inclusive sweater. It features a fairly shallow v-neck, some interesting sort of contiguous saddle shoulder construction where you sort of create this diagonal line that then goes down, so that looks really interesting. It has some rolled edges, and then the most interesting part is the bottom hem, which is kind of reminiscent of the Astrid pullover, but definitely also unique in itself because there's also sort of a rolled edge at the bottom, and the sort of the indent is a little bit more shallow, I would say, with this one. This is designed to be pretty long in the body, but I'm sure you would be able to crop that as well if you would prefer. And if you're not familiar with Celine Phaeton's patterns, they are very, very well written. They're very detailed. So if you're fairly new to garment knitting, I think she would really hold your hand within the pattern. If you are a very experienced garment knitter and you don't like too many details, you will find her pattern writing style a little bit overwhelming. I fall into the latter category, so I have to find ways to filter out the bits that I don't need within her patterns, but I think she's an excellent designer for beginner knitters. To finish off, let's talk about the Clematis sweater by Emma Mayer. This is a really, really cool design because it features a diagonal button band. Now, it is called a sweater, not a cardigan, even though it's worked pretty much all flat with a button band, but I think that is because you wouldn't really ever be wearing this open because the bit at the top that is wider would just sort of flop open. So the button band is very much a striking visual detail within a regular stockinette sweater, which is exactly what this pattern roundup has been all about. It is worked at an 18 stitch gauge. There is also a chunky version. So if you want a thicker sweater, please do go and check out her other pattern. I believe it is almost size inclusive. It goes up to a 58-inch bust, so could do with one extra size at the top. But yes, a really striking design. And if you have seen, Petite Knit also has a pattern that features that diagonal line with buttons. But I personally, at least, would really prefer to support a smaller designer who basically came up with this construction type first, in my opinion. So yes, if you have seen the pattern by Petite Knit, but you would like to support a smaller designer, I would highly recommend the Clematis sweater. Those are all the patterns I have to share with you today. I do think that there will probably be a round 2 of this because over the next few months, I will definitely try and gather more and more patterns that are like this. Just a plain stockinette sweater with a little bit of extra spice. If you enjoyed this video, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe and leave me a comment and let me know what you're knitting on. Let me know if you know any more patterns like this so I can gather some more for a next roundup. And please stay tuned for my future pattern roundups and my podcast. And if you like the look of my second piping hot sweater, then stay tuned and I will be sharing more about it in my next episode. Thank you so much for being here. I will leave you with some dog walking footage as always, or most of the time whenever I get a chance to film something. And I wish you a lovely day and happy knitting. Bye bye.